your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2, where we are walking with the Lord through his revised plan, if you would. Daniel chapter 2 is the dream we've been looking at, Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And we asked that question, this is one of the questions we've asked and sort of have stirred through a bit, but why would God give that dream to a non-believer, if you would? He's got, despite the failure, if that's what you want to call it, which I think is appropriate, the failure of the kings to sort of live up to what God had designed. Despite that, God could have revealed something like this dream, which is absolutely prophetic. It's going to reveal history from Nebuchadnezzar's time to essentially the end of time. And it's just, you can get little prophecies, right? And you can have, you find some prophecies in the Bible that are going to be fulfilled in the next verse, kind of thing. You get one of these, and it's going to span human history from the time of Nebuchadnezzar on. And it's just profound. And he drops it, the Lord drops it into the mind of a non-believing king, one who's actually conquered Jerusalem and taken their people captive. That, if that verse has never rung true in your life, then it will yet. But God's ways are not our ways, right? He constantly surprises with the way he approaches things. And one of the ways we get caught up in it as Christians, of course, if that's the way the Lord did it in their life, he must do that in my life the same. And we can quickly put God in a box, and then he'll blow out all the sides. And then, if you get that a few times, you sort of learn he is not us. Right? Our ways are different than his ways. His ways are different than our ways. Well, perfect example. After all the failure of the kings and the Babylonians have come in, taken part of Judah captive, and Daniel being amongst them, and putting them essentially in slavery. They're going to be slaves for the rest of their lives, servants in the palace. Pretty nice place to be a slave, I guess, if you're going to have to get that title. But that's where Daniel finds himself. And we've talked often about, in this scenario, about the applications. God has given gifts to every one of you, just like he had given gifts to Daniel. And they may range from wisdom, intellect, so forth, which was part of the features that attracted Daniel to the people in the palace that were looking for candidates. But and of course, the interpretation of dreams in Daniel's case. Now, we entered chapter 2 of Daniel, and Daniel has not risen to that prominent place yet. We've talked about this, but we know that we read the story a few times. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. He's totally troubled by it in the morning, and to the point where he calls all his magicians, sorcerers, anybody that's supposed to be wise in his kingdom. They were known for, astrology, astronomy, and you name it. They were already diving into the sciences, if you would, and they, not only that, into the supernatural. They were claiming to have supernatural powers, the sorcerers and so forth. And Nebuchadnezzar calls them all to his palace and says, I want you to interpret this dream, but I'm not going to take any, false interpretation. I've had it with lies, I've had it with, if I hold a gun to your head and tell you to come up with interpretation for the dream, and I give you the dream, you're going to come up with something. You just will. So if you say you have supernatural powers, and if it's actually true, then you'll be able to tell me what my dream is. I won't tell you it at all. And that's how he marks the line in the sand, so to speak. And, of course, they freak out. Because nobody would ask such a thing. This is impossible. And so in that story, of course, it goes on. But Daniel is not in the know. Here's how we know he's not that prominent yet. Because when the decree goes out when they say, well, we can't do that, he says, well, you're all dead. And then he sends his guard. He says, I want you to gather them all up and I want you to kill them all. Well, Daniel wasn't aware. So he didn't even get the memo. He wasn't important enough yet to have received the memo, even though he was known to be, being groomed to be one of the king's counselors in that group of what we call wise men. But he wasn't aware. And when the guy shows up, this guard, he goes, what's all the ruckus? Essentially, is what he's going to say. Why is this all going on? His name is Arioch. So, but of course, when we've gone through this portion, Daniel says, well, hey, hold on. My God's able to do this. Do that. Give me a voice here, and let me talk with God, and we'll figure this out. So he is granted some time. He goes and gets Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they head into a night of prayer. Whether they pray through the night or not, it's not evident, but they obviously dive into very heartfelt prayer, asking God to reveal not only the interpretation, that's the easy one, if you would. What's the dream? And that's the stage that we are at in chapter 2. And we have already looked at that, the dream itself. So, God reveals it to Daniel. Verse 25 of chapter 2, let's just step in there to pick up the context here. Arioch, that's that guard that went out to execute all the wise men. It says, then Arioch brought in Daniel before the king in haste, and said thus unto him, I have found a man of the captives of Judah that will make known unto the king the interpretation. So the king answered and said unto Daniel, and they go on, and Daniel reveals what God has revealed to him. He reveals the dream, and then he reveals the interpretation. And so let's go to that interpretation, which is where we were last week. So, well, let's just pick it up at verse 31, because this is the dream itself. Thou, O king, sawest, and behold, a great image. This great image, whose brightness was excellent, stood before thee, and the form thereof was terrible. This image's head was of fine gold, his breast, his arms of silver, his belly, his thighs of brass, legs of iron, feet, part of iron, part of clay. And thou sawest tell that a stone was cut out without hands, which smote the image upon his feet that were of iron and clay, and brake them to pieces. Then was the iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together, and became like the chaff of the summer threshing floors. And the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain, and filled the whole earth. This is the dream, and we will tell the interpretation thereof before the king. Now, I imagine, don't you hope that when you get to glory, you get, I don't know, they got VCRs or whatever they call them now, but you're going to get to see some of this play out. Because I imagine that King Nebuchadnezzar's mouth is dropping open with every word that's coming out of Daniel's mouth. Because bit by bit, he's just peeling off the smoke, or peeling away the smoke, or parting the smoke, and he's getting to see, his mind is reminded of this dream that he had in detail. And how could he have known? How is it possible? What he is witnessing, what Nebuchadnezzar, this unsaved, this heathen king is witnessing, is God performing an absolute profound miracle right in front of him. Just the fact of revealing what his dream was. And it could have been anything. The dream, you know, you've had dreams, it could have been anything, right? And it needn't have even had this type of significance. It could have been one of those where, and we come across those in the scripture, you're going to be dead by the morning. You know, not a happy dream, that's called a nightmare. And then it comes true kind of thing. But the dream that is revealed, of course, is this profound prophetic utterance from God revealing to Nebuchadnezzar. And of course now, in this moment of time, Daniel's position before the king is rising. And it's not going to be any wonder that he's going to put him at the top. Right? What does God have in store for you? It could be that there are some gifts in you yet that have been sort of latent. They've been used over the years a bit, but maybe there's a time. Maybe it's already come. You know, we think of profound things like this, but God thinks of pretty profound things like one soul getting to heaven. One soul, and what does God say? The angels rejoice. And I imagine it's not staged rejoicing. Right? I don't think, you know how they hire the mourners? You know, and they're essentially acting sad. I don't think the angels are acting happy. When God's will is fulfilled, I believe the angels are ecstatic. And when your gifts that you are given, and the gifts that I'm given, are used for God's purposes in drawing one soul to Him, isn't that more than this, than knowing what's coming? Isn't even, you know, part of what Jesus said when He left this earth, you guys are going to do more stuff than I did. Really? Isn't that pretty dramatic? Plain? But He's given us authority to take on this ministry, this gospel ministry, right, and go forward with it. And your gifts, my gifts, are for God's purposes. Daniel's talk about his light shining. Pow. Right now. Right before the king. Now we've, as I said, we stepped into this already. This dream. Let's just step back again, remind ourselves of some of the things. This is like God speaks in hidden ways, if you would, parables. He could just come down, you know, just flat out and start, okay, sit down, we're going to have a history lesson, a future history lesson, and start talking about, you know, what's going to happen with the different nations. Boom, 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 boom. He doesn't do that. No, he can do that, but he didn't do that. He says, let's do a dream thing. And I said this last time, he must have fun. Yes. Just being creative about, you know, how can I mess with their heads a bit? He wants to mess with our heads, actually. He wants to. He can say in succinct words what he decides to put in a parable in a way that you are supposed to get your head messed with a bit. A Samaritan? Why do you pick a Samaritan? Of all people. And you don't hear anymore because you're complaining to yourself about Jesus. If he was a prophet, he wouldn't use a Samaritan as an example. I'm out of here. Right? What is he doing? Well, he's doing his God thing. He's getting our attention. It's not his will that any should perish. He wants to use what he's doing to get our attention. And he does this thing, and he does a dream of this huge, enormous image of a man. So we sort of have a heads up. I bet there's something about humanity coming. Right? And all these, these fine elements, right? Gold, silver, brass, right? That you have discovered, man has discovered in God's earth, refined and brought to a place of value, if you would, right? God put it there and we sell it. Right? God put the gold in the ground, we dig it out, and we say it's ours. I'm putting a claim on this. It's mine. And now I'm going to sell it. And it becomes this most valuable, precious metal. Silver. You go down, of course, the finery is dropping, and so you go down that body, right? But it's going to be, I don't know what the interpretation is, but I have a good idea before even hearing it. It's something about humanity, and there's something going on, because at the end it all gets destroyed. Utterly destroyed. And it doesn't matter if it's gold or if it's clay. It's like chaff that's blown in the wind, and you can't even find it. It's just gone. What was that? Whatever the story's going to be, whatever the interpretation is, there is something coming, if you would, that is going to contradict or act against, if you would, whatever glory man thinks he can come up with. That much you could sort of piece together. Like I said, if the gun is held to your head, you'd come up with interpretation. You could fly with this thing, couldn't you? You could already get a few things going. And it would sound good.
What you were saying about using this narrative, and I think sometimes God can't use us if we think too much of ourselves, so He doesn't want the person at the bottom, and that we're all equal, just like the gold, the silver, and the clay.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
in God's eyes, we don't have this, I'm somebody,
He likes to press buttons that need to be pressed. They need to be pressed so that we would stir ourselves out of our own box. Right? We've got it figured out. And He's going to move it.
But you also suggested that Daniel sort of rose to his potential.
Absolutely.
And that is a difficult subject, though, isn't it? It's a separate thing that we consider about ourselves. I think of my brother-in-law in front of the doctor one time at age 70, and the doctor said to him, "Your best before date has gone by."
Well,
and then this whole thing about where our potential is with God, and how many names and people just sort of disappear out our lives when they go into retirement and they're gone.
Yeah.
And we're talking here about rising to your potential. Not disappearing.
Your brother-in-law should have brought up Moses. As we understand it, he's at the 80 point.
Right.
80. Now, what gifts did he have? Well, he had leadership skills, right? He had an immense amount of knowledge, wisdom already that he was brought up in Egypt. He had all sorts of credentials.
being raised in the palace.
Raised in the palace, apparently he had some strength, right? Strength of character. And now, and I think probably what helped him the most is hauling sheep around forever. Because now he's going to step in. Now 80, he's ready, right? It's not up to us. That is to determine how and when. God has put the gifts in us, and He is going to interweave sort of the unraveling of your life. And at a certain point, He's going to bring people across your path. And when those interactions occur, right, this is opportunities God has for your gifts to be used for Him. Now,
Will a death sentence first have to be passed over me before I come to my potential?
no, I hope not.
Your best
But of
before
course,
date.
if that's the, I think I mentioned this last time, but I was reading recently about Samson. I know he's the strongest guy on earth probably, but not the brightest by any stretch, right? But he had a lot of gifts given to him. And in the end, you know, he's milling wheat, you know, like a horse. But when is his, you know, his one gift, the strength potential, used? On his deathbed, essentially, right? God isn't done with us till we're done. It's a pretty easy way, you know, to pull out a lesson. But Daniel's is happening, by the way, early in his life. Daniel, in terms of the timeline, right, he's going to get taken in here over by Jehoiakim, right? The nation of Judah is not even done. It's getting done, but it's not totally done. But he gets taken away when the first captivity occurs. They're taken away, the Babylonians come, and Daniel gets taken. Well, the nation of Judah is still going to go on a bit, but we don't hear about it at all. Daniel is taken as a young man, and he is going to live through the 70 years of captivity. Remarkable. And God had him shine early, because he was going to put him up in a place of prominence, which remains. And it is showtime for Daniel. So, as I said, I think the mouth of Nebuchadnezzar was dropping further and further open as those words were coming out of Daniel. Verse 37 continues now with the interpretation. Thou, O king, art a king of kings. For the God of heaven hath given thee a kingdom, power and strength and glory. Now, I'm going to pause here just because, remember when we started this book of Daniel, one of the things that God is going to reveal again and again is his sovereignty, no matter who thinks they're in charge down here. So, despite who is ruling, if you would, Canada, who's ruling the U.S., who's ruling in your nations and so forth, who is really ruling? Even despite Satan having his dominion right now. Who's running it? God is. And he's going to make, through this book, he's going to repeat that theme. So, does Nebuchadnezzar think he's pretty hot stuff? Yes. Yes. Now, God's already started to mess with him because he got him shaking through a dream. Right? What do you tell your child when they wake up with a nightmare? It's okay, it's not real. Not real. It's going on in there. Right? Right? Call it to the Lord, he's all good, nice and safe, nobody's going to get you. Right? You talk him down off that ladder, whatever kind of thing. Right? Well, he's brought Nebuchadnezzar, who thinks himself quite highly, right? And he's brought him trembling through a dream. He's already got his attention with something quote unquote not real. It's floating around. It's neurons firing off in his head, revealing stuff. And he says, thou, O king, art a king of kings, but the God of heaven is the one that gave it to you. He should be taking notes. He's probably still in shock that the guy knows the dream. But he should be taking notes about what's going on and what's coming at him right now. But it says, verse 38, and wheresoever the children of men dwell, the beasts of the field and the fowls of the heaven, hath he given into thine hand, and hath made thee ruler over them all. There's so many he's referring to God. He did it. He did it. He did it. He did it. So all the I did it, I did it, I did it, I did it is supposed to fall away. Now it's easy to talk to, look at this story and you're criticizing Nebuchadnezzar. I do this all the time in my flesh, right? I did it. I did it, I did it, I did it, and I even carry that into salvation. I know intellectually I didn't do it, but this flesh rises up and says, it's no wonder God saved me. It's what we do. It's what we do. And we need to be, notched into place as well, just like Nebuchadnezzar. He didn't do it. Well, isn't it, I've said this so often over the years, but that God would have to say in the Psalm, I think it is, you didn't make yourselves. He really has to tell us that. Could have sworn I did. How is it that a child, we have a 2-year-old granddaughter now, this time she thinks she's pretty bright and she's got it figured out. How can that be? We just arrive on this earth, we're here for a vapor, it's called, and we think we've got it all figured out, and we start telling everybody that we've got it right. If you've got any right in you, it's from God. Then God did it, and God gave it to you. God revealed it to you. God allowed it to be in you, if you would. It's from God. And we need to hear the story just like Nebuchadnezzar. But, he says, it said, thou art this head of gold. Oh, okay, that's what the gold's about. That's Nebuchadnezzar. What does that mean? Well, we're going to talk some more, he said. But in this dream, this is you. Okay, all right. Well, I like it that I'm the gold part, right? That would be nice. Better than the brass, right? Better than silver. And it's the head. That's not a bad spot to be. Well, after thee shall arise another kingdom. Oh, pause. You mean you're going to talk about kingdoms? You already know it. Right now, you know it. You're this kingdom. After you is coming another kingdom. After me? After me. We live, the center of the world is here, right? And this is me now, and it's pretty well all pertinent. Everything is revolving around me. And whatever it is that you think of yourselves, there's a silver gun. At the very least. There's something, there's an after. There's an after. There's an after. Jake?
It's just a scene in the whole play. That everybody's lifetime is just a scene in the whole play. There's more to the story, and you won't be in it.
The Bible it tells us we ought not to think of ourselves more or less of than we ought. I mean, there's a place that we have. This is helping us put it in place, Maggie.
I always think of like the Israelites when they were in Egypt. Generation after generation, they were just slaves. Their whole life was in slavery. It was just their little part was just living that out. And then they were gone.
And then they were gone. They were here and gone. Yeah. And there's actually, he came to save his people from their sins.
It's not about this.
Well, and so what about all the people that have come and gone, or all the people that are going to come and go? Well, already just that statement is saying that something he's going to do is so profound, he's going to save people from their sins. It's not that there's going to be a segment of history where people are saved from their sins. All people, all time, are going to be saved from their sins if they want it, right? Mm-hmm. It's available. How do you get that done? How do you get that done? Well, not naturally. If you haven't got that one. There's silver coming. He's going to go on. He doesn't dwell on that at all, right? After thee shall arise another kingdom inferior to thee. Well, that's nice to hear. At least I was better. I don't know. Is that what you say? At least they're inferior to me. But they're going to be inferior, he says, to thee, and another third kingdom of brass, which shall bear rule over all the earth. So, okay. I think I know where you're going with it. You're saying, I'm looking at a picture of humanity's kingdoms, starting with me. I like my position, by the way. I like it. I like that a lot. And there's other kingdoms coming. So now we're down to the third one, but there's kingdoms like mine that are gonna rule the world. But apparently, I'm not around anymore.
I got a great grandson.
Yes. But you're already, this dream and the prophecy is so profound. What is he talking about? He's talking about world empires that are yet to come, like his right then. Okay?
Excuse me,
Yes?
is this where we are headed for right now in our generation, that one world government?
Well, I believe that we're in this, yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't think anybody can escape that, but there's different interpretations, of course, you get. And by the way, well, let's just continue on. There's not much controversy about the early ones, the gold, silver, brass, and so forth. It only gets down once you're in the clay iron part that there's sort of different views. We'll talk about that in a bit. So, and he says, where are we at? Okay, after this shall arise another kingdom inferior, end of verse 3, which shall bear rule over all the earth, verse 40. And then the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron. By the way, we talked about that. It seems like something having to do with strength is involved in this transitioning. But strength, but still inferior. Now that's a bit to think about. But as I said, you don't typically make a hammer out of gold, and that's not just because it costs too much. Because you would hit the nail, and the nail would penetrate into the head of the hammer. It's not a very hard metal. And you go through this, and of course, now you get to iron. Well, now we're talking strength. And depending on how you temper it and so forth, you can make it stronger. It is now we're at a material that has got a lot of strength to it, but there's something else going on with this, of course. It says, the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaketh in pieces and subdueth all things. And as iron that breaketh all these, shall it break in pieces and bruise. So it's going to actually be used. What will be? The strength. It's going to dominate. And at the same end, it's going to break and bruise. And then it says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes. Now we're down to the bottom. Okay? Feet and toes. And now it gets mixed. And it says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. So there's going to come a time now, kingdom, divided kingdom. Pretty divided. Sounds like with the toes and all that, right? And then it's mixed with this, it's got both materials. It's got, nobody, by the way, you started off with gold, you're not going to make a hammer out of gold, you're not going to make it out of clay either. Right? Because it won't work for you. But there's this mixture going on. So there's this idea of strength and weakness, and they're all sort of floating together, or even stuck together, but they're not merged. They don't mix. Well, and it says, and whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of the strength of iron. For as much as thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, that's like potter's clay, that's something that can be baked into a vessel. Verse 42, and as the toes of the feet were part of iron, part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong, partly broken. And whereas thou sawest iron mixed with the miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. A lot of detail on the feet. Iron, clay, toes thing. Lots more silver passed right through. Brass, just go on. You get down here, a lot of chatter in the interpretation about what's going on, right, in this kingdom time. So, it says, and in the days of these kings, which king? Those mixed iron, clay, kingdom kings. Back then.
What does it mean when you say that they shall mingle themselves with the seed of man? Like, who is they?
Well, we'll try to unravel, unpack some of that. We're gonna, I'm not Daniel, by the way.
That's right, you're worried, I'm sorry.
And I'm gonna rely a lot on what other scholars have looked at. I buy some of it, I don't buy all of it, and you can do the same. Because we don't know, God knows, of course, Daniel had a pretty good idea, but in terms of he's just talking about stuff he doesn't even realize what he's saying, right? But, coming back in here, and it says, I'm going to read 44 again. In the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom. Oh. Now, if I didn't point out earlier, remember when we started Daniel as well, I mentioned this word kingdom? And it shows up, what did I say at the time? This word shows up in the book of Daniel lots of times. What did I say? I might have written it down. But it is prominent in this book, the word kingdom. What God is going to do, and of course with a dream like this, he is talking about the kingdoms of this earth. This statue of this man is talking about the kingdoms of humanity. What we're looking at is, if you would, the best that man can do, if from our perspective, let's say. These kingdoms, Babylon, by the way, I have to do this. Do you know what God intended to do here? God was going to set up a kingdom on this earth in the promised land, centered in Jerusalem, for all the nations of the world to look at it and go, who in the world is their God? This was his plan. To what purpose? That the Messiah would come through this line of Judah, and thereby all the nations would be drawn to the Messiah that would come, that no man should perish. That was his deal. He was going to build a kingdom. And it got to a point, he said, okay guys, there's no remedy here. We're shutting this plan down. Not the purpose, we're shutting the plan down. Now, I don't know if you've ever asked this question about this dream, but why start with Nebuchadnezzar? Well, I just gave you the answer. Because this one didn't work. And now he's going to start with a different plan. His purpose is the same. God will change plans as necessary, but his purpose will never change. He had to change his plan a number of times along here. Saul was plan A in terms of kings. You guys want a king? I'm going to give you a king. Saul. I chose him. Saul didn't work out. Plan B for kings. David. Now we got somebody. Man after my own heart. We got him. Let's do this thing. And we're not going back, by the way. He said. So you can pray about that deal. I'm not going to hear you now. We're doing kings thing. You want kings? We're doing kings. This is the plan. We're going to make a kingdom. It did not work. Why? Because of God? No, not because of God. As always, because of our sin. So he's going to the next plan. And now he's going to talk about kingdoms in a dream to Nebuchadnezzar. And he's going to put at the top this world power empire, Babylon, the gold, the star, which has been building up around the outskirts of, right? We've talked about the different powers that came and their forces would show up in Jerusalem, the Assyrians, right? And so on. Egyptians, Assyrians, Babylonians. Well, the Babylonians are there now. What's the now? when this kingdom is done. It didn't work. Their sin caused God's plan not to work. So now God's going to continue his purpose, but he's going to do it now in a different. And look at this statue. Is Babylon a godly kingdom? No. Is silver, which is good, right? We're going to go through this. The silver, the brass, all the way down and through. Are they godly kingdoms? They are not. Godly kingdom done, the thing is done. That is on the outside. That is on as I'm looking at a nation. Where now? The kingdom of God is now here. Who said that? Jesus did. He's still going to work it out, but it's going to be a whole new deal. And so he's going to come in, and now when we read of this, when we read this drastic part, if you would, right? He's going to say, we're in verse 44. Shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed? Oh boy, I can't get very far before I have to hit a pause button again. You know, when you start with the gold and you say, and after this, silver. You get down to this kingdom, there's no after. It's done. This kingdom is now forever. Wow.
This is after Armageddon, right?
This is the established eternal kingdom of God forever done. He has come, he has taken you through this thing, right? And you know, as revealing as this is to Nebuchadnezzar, I'm not going to be here forever. Isn't that amazing that that's a revelation to us? We're not going to be around and in power forever. But as you're coming down, but now, this, in the God of heaven, not the God of the Babylonians, or the Greeks, or Romans, it won't matter. It's the God of heaven now. And that God of heaven, when he sets up his kingdom on earth, right, there isn't anybody after. In fact, it's more dramatic than that, right? Because he's going to go on. And it shall stand forever, and verse 45 says, for as much as thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands. Which stone? This is that stumbling stone. This is that Jesus Christ, the rock. This is that analogy now to the coming Messiah. Which Messiah? The one that was supposed to be revealed through this kingdom, is getting revealed in this dream to Nebuchadnezzar. And Daniel's giving him the interpretations. And he's going to come out now, and he's going to say, this is going to stand forever. Thou sawest that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it brake in pieces what? Well, he starts right at the bottom. It breaks in pieces the iron, the brass, the clay, the silver, the gold. All of it. The great God hath made known to the king what shall come to pass hereafter, and the dream is certain, and the interpretation thereof sure. Remember the dream? That stone comes and smashes this thing at the feet. And when he does that, all of it is just like chaff. It's just gone. And it doesn't matter if you were gold, Nebuchadnezzar, or if you were clay at the feet, the toes, you are exactly the same. Whatever is coming is a leveling field. And that is what Jesus Christ is. It is the most level field that there can possibly be. It is impossible to make a field than Jesus Christ. Salvation through his blood. It's just done. Everybody's the same. All the way across. And And you're either gonna trip over that stone, right, or you're gonna get saved and stand on that stone forever. And this is what is being revealed to an unsaved heathen king. Now, we're gonna walk through, I'm gonna give you a brief outline of this interpretation. And some of it you guys will, of course, have heard before. I'm not going to give you a whole lot of information that you haven't already heard over the years, sometimes from preachers, sometimes your own study. But the head of gold, of course, is Nebuchadnezzar, the ruler of the Babylonian Empire. The silver chest and the two arms, if you would, are understood to be the Medo-Persian Empire. They're going to come in before the captivity is done, right? Who's coming in? Well,
Darius.
yeah, means the Persians are coming in. That's the silver. And then it says the belly and thighs of bronze were Greece, Macedonia under Alexander the Great, who conquered the Medo-Persian Empire in 334. And then, after that, the legs of iron, understood to be Rome, who conquered the Greeks in 63. So, and you come through that, and there's very little dispute. But when you get to the iron clay thing, right? The feet of clay and iron represent the breakup of the Roman Empire. And this is sort of where I'm reading this, and this is sort of my view. I see this, but when you say Roman Empire, when you hear Roman Empire, we are an extension, as I see it, of the Roman Empire, the Western civilization. And we're going to get into that a little bit eventually. But what is happening, there's sort of the Eastern civilization, the Western civilization, all that, but it's all, and I brought some material on that, but we are so influenced by Roman civilization, right? Right down to, and some leftovers of the Greeks as well, of course. But there is, in our political structure, there's so much stuff that is still, if you would, Roman. Now, I'll give you an easy one. Roman Catholic Church. All right? So it's not just bits and pieces. I mean, it's just permeated out there. So we're coming down, but then we're going to sort of touch on that. Now, the other sort of controversy pieces, if you would, are the rock. But, you know, it's understood for the most part that's Jesus. But the sort of the events, where that lands in history, in prophetic history, if you would, that's where that exactly hits. That's sort of played around by different scholars. I don't see it as an issue at all, other than it certainly speaks of the absolute end when his kingdom is established, and there isn't any after. This is my big point on that one. Go ahead, Alan.
I think it would be helpful to remember that this whole thing is set up allegorically.
What does that mean?
That it's a painted picture that likens to what is going to happen.
And the other thing is, of course, you're talking to people that have no advantage of looking back in history. So now, he's talking to people that just have to accept at face value, but what's being spoken. And I'll try to add to that this. The least obvious place to figure out prophecy is when you're in it. Okay? The easiest place to determine and discern prophecy is when you're way past it. And you recognize when it was said, and you can sort of look back and you can see. Well, that's why there's very little controversy at all on these early gold, silver, brass pieces. And now, part of the confusion, I believe, pretty heavily, strongly, is that we're in this clay iron thing, and we don't know quite where we are. We're floating around there now.
Just a point of clarification that Artaxerxes will have understood from in some amount of history that kingdoms come and go.
Yes.
And he was part of that, and he knew that that's how it
But
happened.
it's coming, yes. But in terms of Nebuchadnezzar, if you're talking to him, he's just going, I'm here. I mean, and he has no way necessarily, and especially at the time of the revelation, of knowing whether this is true or not. That is, he doesn't know whether it's going to come to pass. What he does know is someone is in front of him that told him a dream that there's no human way he could have known it. And the only thing he knows that is for sure is that he is king, and he is like gold, even if it's in his own mind. He knows where he is. But it's a very difficult thing. Even, it's sort of like, what was our king that God prophesied, was it Hezekiah, gave him the 15. At least it won't happen in my time. Right? Kind of idea. Well, Nebuchadnezzar can say, well, that all sounds good, at least it's not going to happen in my time, and I'm gold. But he doesn't know what's coming. It's prophesied already that his end is coming, right? But we never think of our end. Well, we have difficulty thinking of our end. I have mentioned before my 93-year-old uncle laying on his deathbed because he could no longer swallow. And any food that would go in would aspirate, and the doctor said, we cannot feed you, you're going to die. Despite everything that the doctors told him, and that they told him he was not leaving the hospital. What do you mean? What does that mean? You're not leaving. Well, how could I leave if you don't feed me? How am I supposed to get better if you don't feed me? Of course, feed me and I'll get out of here. It's pretty common sense, isn't it, Doc? Right? He didn't think he was leaving this planet yet. We think we're pretty permanent. God is gonna, we're ending our time. We are hearing from Nebuchadnezzar's mind, if you would, and through the interpretation Daniel's giving, that it's ending. It's all going to end. And it doesn't matter, necessarily where you are in this thing. It doesn't matter if you're gold or you're clay, it's going to get shattered. The biggest message is the end kingdom, the final one. Who cares where you were in this? Don't you want to be in that final one? The one where there is nothing after. That's God's point. Always has been. That's the point. So you can get caught up in all this other stuff. And actually, all that other stuff, when you look at it, that's like the stuff that comes out the back of the combine. Right? And it's nice when there's wind, at least you know which direction it's going, so you can get on the other side of it. That's all you care about, the chaff, just not get in front of it. It's blown, it's gone, dust. But you want to be in that kingdom, the one where there is nothing after. And that's part of our purpose. Your gifts. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you for your absolutely miraculous word. And how you have stepped into human history and you have controlled it. And you continue to control it. And you are sovereign. We praise you for that. I pray that you would help us, Lord, to be that light in this world, using our gifts for your purposes as you desire. Help us as we step into this Advent season and look forward to celebrating your coming to do what had to be done for us. In Jesus' name.